The recipe card was tattered at the edges, the ink faded to a rusty sepia, but on the back, in my grandmother's scratchy cursive, was a line I didn't see until I'd already sold the one thing my husband left me and handed over my entire life savings to a child who was about to sell me out for $1 million. It said, "Do not trust Kelsey. Save yourself." That warning sat inside a false-bottomed box on my mantel for 47 years without me knowing it existed, and by the time I read it, my only daughter and her husband had already forged my signature on a $250,000 loan, franchised a brand built entirely on my grandmother's recipe, and were 10 days away from a $1-2 million sale that would have written me out of my own legacy forever. What they didn't know, what none of us knew, was that my grandmother saw this coming before Kelsey was even born, and she had quietly planted a legal tripwire so perfectly engineered that the moment they tried to cash out, everything they'd stolen collapsed in a single afternoon in a downtown bank lobby, with FBI agents at the door and my daughter in handcuffs, screaming my name while I walked out with nothing but a clear conscience and a federal court judgment that would redirect their entire fortune straight back into my pocket, and I did it all without raising my voice above a whisper. My name is Lorna Haskett, and if you passed me on the street, you'd see a 52-year-old woman with flour under her nails and a hairnet still in her purse, the kind of invisible middle-aged widow who blends into the background of a busy diner. For almost 30 years I worked the griddle at the Blue Ridge Depot off I-81 in Roanoke, Virginia, a truck stop joint with cracked vinyl booths, and a pie case that ran empty by noon on Saturdays. Before that I spent a decade as a bookkeeper for a small textile plant in Martinsville, so I could read a balance sheet, a cash flow statement, or a UCC filing like most people read a recipe. I married my husband Leo when I was 22. He was a gearhead with grease permanently tattooed into his knuckles, and over 7 summers in a rented garage, we rebuilt a cherry red 1978 Ford F-150 stepside from the frame up, every bolt and bearing sourced from salvage yards and polished by hand. That truck was the only beautiful thing I ever owned, and when Leo died of a heart attack at 47, the truck became a reliquary for every memory I couldn't bear to let go of. We had one child together, Kelsey, who inherited Leo's charm and my work ethic, but who, somewhere in her 20s, swapped out her moral compass for a hunger I couldn't recognize. She married a man named Travis Whitmore, a marketing consultant who wore Italian loafers with jeans and talked about brand equity and vertical integration like he'd invented capitalism. He convinced her that my generation didn't understand leverage. I convinced myself he was just ambitious. The discovery landed on a Tuesday in the 3rd week of March, a day so ordinary I can still smell the cold butter I was cutting into flour when my phone lit up on the kitchen counter. I wiped my hands on my apron and glanced at the screen. It was a push alert from a regional business journal I didn't remember subscribing to, and the headline punched the air out of my lungs. Local food truck brand Graham's Golden Crust acquired by restaurant group for $1-2 million. My hands went sticky and still. Graham's Golden Crust was the name of the food truck I had personally funded 3 years earlier, handing over $50,000 cash from the sale of Leo's pickup to help my daughter launch a business built around my grandmother Elmira's century-old pie recipe, a recipe so beloved that truckers used to reroute their hauls just to get a slice on their layovers. The deal had been simple: my money, her sweat, and a written agreement sketched on a legal pad that guaranteed me 30% of net profits in perpetuity, plus an absolute veto on any sale or transfer of the recipe. Kelsey signed it, I signed it, we hugged. I trusted her. Now, according to the article, Travis Whitmore was listed as the sole proprietor of the brand. The recipe was described as a family heirloom gifted to the founders, and my 30%, the agreement, my very existence, had been erased. Within 2 hours of that alert, Kelsey and Travis pulled into my driveway in a leased Mercedes SUV that smelled like new leather and strategic debt. Kelsey was wearing a cream silk blouse and carrying a structured tote bag that cost more than the transmission rebuild on Leo's truck. Travis was already on his phone, pacing the porch, and as he passed the open window I caught the tail end of a sentence that ended with "balloon payment due Friday. We can't float this much longer." I tucked that phrase away like a loose thread I'd pull later. Kelsey wrapped me in a hug that felt rehearsed, her arms meeting at a precise distance from my shoulders as if a photographer were framing us. "Mom, you saw the news. Isn't it incredible? We sold the master franchise license. A restaurant group out of Charlotte wants to put Graham's Golden Crust in 15 cities. They're valuing the brand at $1 million too. This is it. This is what we've been working toward." I stood in my own doorway with flour on my apron and asked, very softly, "What about our agreement, the 30% I never signed off on a sale?" Travis pocketed his phone mid-sentence and turned toward me with a smile that didn't engage a single muscle around his eyes. "Lorna, that was a startup piece of paper, a gesture to get the ball rolling. The recipe was a gift. We have legal opinions that confirm it. But listen, we want to protect you. There's some paperwork, a simple indemnity release that will clear you of any liability attached to the franchise. We can go over it tomorrow, it's nothing." As he spoke, his gaze drifted over my shoulder and settled on an old wooden card catalog box sitting on the fireplace mantel. The box was dark walnut, roughly the size of a loaf of bread, with a tiny brass lock that no longer latched, and a patina from 80 years of kitchen grease and handling. Travis gestured at it with his chin. "That looks like kindling. You should let us clear out some of this clutter for you." Kelsey laughed, a high, thin sound that didn't reach her chest. "Oh, Mom, you and your knickknacks. I'll take care of it, I promise. Let me just set it by the door for the donation pile." She stepped past me, lifted the box with both hands, and placed it on the floor next to a bag of old curtains destined for Goodwill. I didn't argue. I was too busy replaying Travis's phrase, "The recipe was a gift," and calculating exactly how much legal jeopardy a person could buy with a statement like that. They stayed an hour, talking about their new house in Cave Spring, about the franchise rollout, about how they'd love to have me visit, maybe even move in with them for a while so they could look after me. I nodded, I smiled, I handed them leftover pie, and the instant their taillights vanished down the darkening street, I retrieved that recipe box with the urgency of a woman pulling a child from a burning building. I carried it to my kitchen table, set it under the light, and ran my fingers over the worn corners. Grammy Elmira had been a baker during the Great Depression, a woman who sold pies door to door in Martinsville to keep her 5 children from starving while her husband labored in a furniture factory. This box had been her filing system, her recipe archive, her treasury. I'd discovered the false bottom when I was 12 years old, kneeling on a chair while she let me sort her index cards. She'd shown me how the thin wooden panel lifted with a butter knife, but I'd never found anything inside beyond a dried sprig of lavender and a 1943 wheat penny, and over the decades I'd forgotten it entirely. Now, with my heart pounding in a rhythm that felt premonitory, I went to my silverware drawer, retrieved a butter knife with a thin blade, and carefully worked it into the seam along the bottom edge. The false floor lifted with a soft crack of aged wood, and nestled in the shallow compartment was a folded square of lined paper, compressed so tightly it was almost a pebble. I unfolded it on the table, smoothing it with both palms. The handwriting was Grammy's, thin and spidery, the ink bled to a warm brown. "Lorna, if you find this, the worst has already come. Do not trust Kelsey, save yourself. The true recipe lives in the crust, and I made certain the name can never be stolen. Elmira." I read it 5 times. The reference to the crust and the name was baffling, but the surface meaning was unambiguous. My grandmother, who died a year before Kelsey was born, had foreseen my own daughter's betrayal and had attempted to warn me from the grave. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe family and business mix about as well as oil and water. Now, the real mechanics of what happened next, the slow forensic dismantling of a fraud masquerading as filial piety, began the following morning. 2 days later, Kelsey and Travis showed up at my house with a moving van and a scripted speech about how it was time to simplify, that they wanted me close, that the guest suite in their Cave Spring home was waiting for me. I understood exactly what they were doing. They needed me under their roof where they could monitor my conversations, intercept my mail, and apply constant, loving pressure until I signed away my rights. I packed a single suitcase and a small bag of toiletries, but I also packed the recipe box, the note, and a cheap prepaid burner phone I'd purchased at a gas station that morning with cash, a phone they would never know existed. When we arrived, their house revealed itself as a 200-square-foot colonial with a 3-car garage, a sub-zero refrigerator, and a pervasive odor of anxiety that no amount of scented candles could mask. My room was a tastefully decorated guest suite on the ground floor, with a private bath and a window overlooking a manicured lawn. "Make yourself at home, Mom," Kelsey said, patting my shoulder. "We'll get that paperwork sorted out in a few days, and then you can just relax." The paperwork in question was a stack of documents Travis slid onto my nightstand that evening, clipped inside a leather portfolio. "Standard release," he said, "just indemnifies the LLC against any old claims, cleans up the chain of title for the franchise. Sign when you're ready, no rush." He smiled his dead-eyed smile and closed the door. That night I waited until the house went quiet, Then I sat cross-legged on the bed with a flashlight and read every line. It was not a release. It was a comprehensive assignment of any and all intellectual property rights, past, present, and future, associated with any recipe, trade name, or trade dress connected to Graham's Golden Crust, or any derivative brand. It contained a clause indemnifying Kelsey, Travis, and their entity Whitmore Holdings, LLC against any claim I might ever bring. It waived my right to a jury trial, and it obligated me to cooperate with any future legal filings that might perfect their ownership. The consideration offered was $0. A sticky note on the signature page read in Kelsey's handwriting, "Sign here, Mom." "Love you." I read it 3 times, then I folded it back into the portfolio, set it on the nightstand, and lay awake until dawn cataloguing everything I'd noticed during the tour. The pile of unopened mail on the kitchen desk, the past due HOA notice I'd glimpsed under a magnet, the way Travis's voice tightened every time his phone buzzed. They were drowning, and they needed my signature to keep their heads above water. That made me the one with leverage, and my only job now was to use their underestimation of me as camouflage. I began playing the role of the foggy, grieving widow that same morning. I shuffled from room to room in slippers, asked Kelsey the same question about the coffee maker 3 times in an hour, and stood in the hallway at night looking lost until someone guided me back to my room. I told them I needed time to understand the paperwork, that my head was a fog, that I just couldn't focus. Kelsey cooed and patted me. Travis huffed and retreated to his office, where I could hear him on the phone, his voice rising and falling with the cadence of a man juggling too many creditors. I learned that if I knelt by the air return vent in the hallway outside the office, the ductwork acted as a sound funnel, and I could hear nearly every word. Within the first week, I filled half a spiral notebook with fragments. The franchise disclosure documents are due to candidates in 7 states. We can't close without them. Brenner says the underwriter is demanding updated financials. They're getting skittish. And on a Thursday afternoon when Travis thought no one was home, a panicked whisper. "The numbers don't pencil out. We need the mother's signature to perfect the lien on the master license, otherwise the entire chain of title collapses and the buyer walks." I recognized that language from my bookkeeping days. A lien on a master license meant they had pledged a portion of the franchise revenue stream as collateral for a loan, and a lender had discovered a defect in the ownership chain. Me. Without my signature releasing my 30% stake and any trademark claims, the loan would default, the sale would crater, and the Whitmores would be personally on the hook for whatever they'd already spent. I started noticing other things. Kelsey's habit of buying cases of Veuve Clicquot for tasting events, while I found overdue utility notices wadded up in the recycling bin. The way Travis would watch me eat dinner, not with affection but with calculation, as if gauging how much longer I might live. One afternoon I found a spreadsheet in the trash can under his desk, printed but not shredded, that listed assets and their liquidation values. My name was on it, next to a line item labeled Life Insurance Surrender Value, and a dollar figure I didn't recognize. They had taken out a policy on me. That discovery turned my stomach into cold granite, and I knew then that this was not merely greed. It was predation. The event that let me reveal an old skill without blowing my cover arrived via a broken espresso machine. It was a shiny Italian contraption that lived on the marble countertop like a chrome altar, and one Thursday morning it made a grinding noise, sputtered, and died. Kelsey wailed. Travis cursed and called a repair service that quoted $340 just for the house call. I watched them pace and fret for 10 full minutes before I said, "I can take a look at it if you want." Travis actually laughed. "You, fix a commercial-grade espresso machine." I shrugged and went to the garage, where I found a small set of precision screwdrivers Leo had given me for our 20th anniversary, a gift I'd kept oiled and sharp for 2 decades. I came back, unplugged the machine, and in 35 minutes I had disassembled the group head, cleared a clogged solenoid valve with the tip of a paper clip, cleaned the pump impeller with a toothbrush, and recalibrated the pressure by ear based on the pitch of the motor under load. I pulled a perfect double shot while Kelsey stared at me like she'd never seen me before. "Where did you learn that?" she asked. "I ran a commercial kitchen for 30 years, I said, wiping the wand. "You think a Hobart dishwasher doesn't have solenoids? A rational oven doesn't have control boards?" The look that passed between Kelsey and Travis was brief but telling. She had spent her entire adult life seeing me as a background character in her story, a sweet old mom who made pie. The realization that I was mechanically competent and unflappable under pressure unsettled them. The shredded documents were a gift from garbage night. Every Monday evening I volunteered to wheel the bins to the curb, a chore that gave me unsupervised access to their refuse. In the recycling bin beneath a stack of flattened Amazon boxes, I found a clear plastic bag full of cross-cut shredder confetti. A quick glance through the bag revealed the distinctive green bar pattern of financial institution printouts. I carried the bag to my room, locked the door, and laid out my supplies: a roll of archival tape, a large open window for backlighting, a pair of needle-nose tweezers from my toiletry kit, and a sheet of wax paper to keep the strips from sticking to the wrong surfaces. The process of reconstructing shredded documents is slow and meditative. You sort first by color, separating the pale green bank statements from the white legal pages and the yellow sticky notes. Then you group by edge pattern. The cross-cut shredder produces rectangular chips roughly 2 mm by 6 mm, and the cut edges have a characteristic bevel. You start at the corners, where the white border gives you a registration point, then work inward, matching the alignment of printed lines and numbers like fitting a jigsaw puzzle of pure malice. I worked through the night, my neck stiff and my eyes burning, and by 5 in the morning, I had reconstructed 3 complete documents. The first was a promissory note for $280,000, made out to a private lender in Wilmington, Delaware, and co-signed by A. Lorna Haskett, whose signature had been forged so crudely that the loop on the L didn't match my handwriting at all. The second was a UCC-1 financing statement filed with the State Corporation Commission, listing my 30% interest in the business as part of the collateral pool for that same loan. The third was a franchise agreement between Whitmore Holdings LLC and a retired couple in Cincinnati, in which Travis represented that Graham's Golden Crust was a trademark wholly and freely owned by the LLC with no encumbrances. That was a false statement made in interstate commerce, and I knew enough to recognize the words wire fraud when they materialized on my wobbly tape collage. I photographed each reconstructed page with my burner phone and uploaded the images to a cloud account I'd created under a fake name, fully encrypted and password protected. I needed proof of knowledge. The shredded documents showed what they had done, but not what they knew about their own illegality. The filing cabinet in Travis's office was a dark grey HON steel unit with a simple wafer lock, the kind you can defeat with a paperclip if you know what you're doing. I knew what I was doing. In my early 20s, before I met Leo, I spent 2 summers working for my older brother Roy, who ran a small locksmith shop in downtown Roanoke. Roy taught me the basics of pin tumbler and wafer locks, how to apply tension with a torsion wrench and rake the pins with a half-diamond pick. I had not touched a lock in 30 years, but muscle memory is durable. The following Friday night, Kelsey and Travis attended a charity gala at the Taubman Museum, and the moment their Mercedes exited the neighborhood, I retrieved my tools. A torsion wrench I'd filed from a windshield wiper insert scavenged from the garage, and a pick shaped from a bobby pin using a pair of needle files I'd borrowed from Leo's old toolbox. The wafer lock in Travis's cabinet had 5 wafers, and it surrendered in under 15 seconds with a satisfying click. Inside, the bottom drawer was labeled Mom on a hanging file tab. It contained a folder with the original legal pad agreement from 3 years prior, the one I had signed with Kelsey in my kitchen. Stapled to it was a document titled Assignment of Recipe Rights, bearing my forged signature in an almost perfect imitation, except the slant was slightly too vertical and the pressure on the L was heavier than my natural hand. Behind that was a memo written by Travis to himself, dated 8 months earlier, that read, "Lorna's claim is based on a moral promise, not a legal one. If she signs the release, we can assert common law trademark ownership prior to any registration and backdate our commercial use with affidavits. Without her sig, we'll need to structure the franchise equity as a license from her, which is impossible given the terms. Priority, neutralize her by any means necessary." I photographed every page, replaced the folder precisely as I had found it, and relocked the cabinet. I also noticed Travis's desktop computer, a sleek tower that sat on his desk with 2 monitors and a blinking webcam. That night I called Delia Morton, the estate attorney who had handled Grammy's Small Will decades earlier. Delia was now in her mid-70s, semi-retired, but she remembered my grandmother vividly. "Elmira was a force," Delia said when we met at a coffee shop off Williamson Road. "She came to my office about a year before she passed, and she was deeply troubled. She told me, 'Delia, I have a granddaughter who is going to be trouble. She's not born yet, but I've seen the meanness in her bloodline.' She asked me to do something that I thought was eccentric at the time, but now I understand it was prophetic." Delia explained that in 1999, long before the food truck existed, My grandmother had filed a federal trademark application with the United States Patent and Trademark Office for the wordmark, Graham's Golden Crust, in connection with baked goods, specifically pies. The application was prosecuted, a specimen of use was submitted, a label from a pie box I remembered her selling at church bazaars, and the registration was granted in early 2000. Under the terms of her will, the trademark was left to me and me alone, contingent upon my survival, and a small trust account had been paying the maintenance fees every decade to keep the registration alive. Kelsey was never named. That meant every pie Kelsey had sold under that brand, every franchise fee she had collected, every single penny of the $1.2 million sale was built on a trademark she did not own and had never been authorized to use. The entire edifice was a violation of federal trademark law, and the damages were statutory, meaning they could be calculated per infringing sale. Delia put me in touch with a federal agent, Barbara Reyes of the FBI's Intellectual Property and White-Collar Crime Unit, based out of the Roanoke field office. Agent Reyes met me in the back booth of a Waffle House at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night, a place where no one from Kelsey's world would ever be seen. I told her the full story, showed her the photographs, and she listened without interrupting, her pen moving in a small notebook. "Ms. Haskett," she said, "what you've described is a conspiracy to commit wire fraud, bank fraud, criminal trademark counterfeiting, and forgery. The promissory note alone is enough to open a case, because the forged signature crosses state lines and implicates a federally insured institution. But to solidify intent, I need to show that they knew the trademark was registered, and they deliberately concealed it from the buyer. Do you have access to any of their internal communications?" I told her about the desktop computer in Travis's office, and she handed me a small device, a USB keylogger no larger than a child's fingernail. "Plug this into the rear port of the tower. It will capture all keystrokes, clipboard contents, and periodic screen captures. You're a legal resident of that home, with authorized access to the common areas, so this is within the bounds of a consensual monitoring arrangement. We just need the evidence that they discussed the trademark internally." That Sunday, during a family dinner that felt like a hostage negotiation, I excused myself to use the restroom, walked instead to the office, inserted the keylogger into an open USB port on the back of the tower, and was back spooning gravy onto my plate in under 90 seconds. The device blinked once and vanished into the cable clutter. The keylogger fed data to a secure server monitored by Agent Reyes, and within 48 hours the trap sprang. She called me on the burner phone from a blocked number. "We have them, Lorna. There are emails between Travis and a franchise attorney in Charlotte, discussing how to paper over the trademark gap. There's a memo where Travis writes, 'Mom Sig is the last hurdle,' then we claim we created the mark in commerce predating the registration. We'll argue she abandoned the mark if she ever had it. And there's a draft of an email he never sent, where he says, if the old woman dies before we close, the whole case collapses and we're on the hook for the balloon payment. We have enough for warrants. I need you to stage one more thing to confirm their state of mind beyond a reasonable doubt." She didn't ask me to stage a medical emergency, but she didn't stop me when I told her my plan. What I call the maximum cruelty beat happened on a muggy Wednesday afternoon, and it broke whatever memory of a daughter I'd been carrying around. I waited until I heard Kelsey's heels on the hardwood, the distinctive tick-tock of her Louboutins, then I stood in the middle of the kitchen, counted to 3 and let my body go. I collapsed sideways, knocking a chair into the island with a violent clatter, and I lay sprawled on the cold tile with my eyes half open, breathing in shallow sips of air, my left arm twisted under me at an unnatural angle. I made my face slack. Kelsey entered the kitchen, saw me on the floor, and stopped dead. For 3 full seconds I thought she might scream or dial 911. Instead, she stepped right over my body, lifting her foot carefully to avoid touching my outstretched hand, and I heard her heels continue down the hallway toward the office. From the floor I could hear her voice, not panicked about a mother dying on the kitchen tile, but sharp and focused on a document. "Travis, the signed assignment, is it in the fire safe, the one we'll need if she dies? Because if she codes before this is notarized, the entire deal falls apart and the lender calls the whole 280 note, we'll lose the house." She said it with the flat effect of someone reading a grocery list. I lay there counting the seconds she was gone, 37 of them, and when she came back she crouched beside me and said, "Mom, can you hear me? Oh, thank goodness you're breathing. Stay still, I'll get water." There was no relief in her voice, only the thin veneer of a woman who needed me alive for exactly as long as it took to get a signature. I waited, let her help me into a chair, sipped the water, and apologized for causing a scare. I knew then that if I had died on that floor, she would have felt nothing but the loss of a line item on a spreadsheet. The surgery was complete. The last filament of maternal hope had been severed. The confrontation was inevitable, and when it came, it arrived wearing a blazer. 3 days after my staged collapse, Travis announced that we were all taking a drive to a branch of United Bank and Trust in downtown Roanoke, where a notary would witness my signature on the final documents. He said it with the breezy confidence of a man who had already mentally spent the money. They dressed me in a navy blouse Kelsey had bought for the occasion, and in the car, Travis rehearsed my lines like a director coaching an actress. Just smile, say you're happy to support your daughter's future, and sign where the notary tells you. Don't ask any questions, don't read the fine print, just trust us. I nodded and stared out the window at the Blue Ridge Mountains, thinking about Grammy and her quiet genius. The bank conference room was all polished oak and muted carpet, with a long table and 6 leather chairs. Seated at the head were a young notary with a stamp and a bank officer named Mr. Albright, who was representing the lender restructuring the balloon note upon the final transfer. Kelsey sat beside me, patting my hand. Travis hovered near the door. The papers were fanned out in front of me, the same comprehensive assignment and release, plus a new document titled Trademark Assignment and Registration Disclaimer. The notary explained that I was signing away any claim to the Graham's Golden Crust trademark. Kelsey slid a heavy silver pen toward me. Go ahead, Mom, it's just a formality. I looked at the pen. I looked at the window where the morning light was catching the dust motes in the air. Then I looked at my daughter's face, and I searched for the baby I had nursed through colic, the girl I had taught to roll pie dough, the young woman I had handed $50,000 in cash earned from selling the one thing Leo left behind. There was nothing there but a tight, transactional impatience. I said, very calmly and very clearly, I am not signing away my mother's legacy to a daughter who would step over my dying body for a signature. I stood up. The conference room door opened, and Agent Reyes walked in with 2 uniformed FBI agents and a representative from the United States Attorney's Office. He announced, Kelsey Whitmore, Travis Whitmore, you are under arrest for federal wire fraud, bank fraud, criminal trademark counterfeiting, and aggravated forgery. Travis lunged for the papers on the table, collided with an agent, and was handcuffed against the wall while his loafers skidded on the carpet. Kelsey screamed, a raw, primal sound, and she turned on me with a face contorted into something I didn't recognize. You can't do this, she's my mother, I'm her daughter. I watched the handcuffs click around her wrists, and I felt nothing but a cold, cleansing emptiness, like a tide pulling back from a polluted shore. The aftermath moved through the federal system with a grinding inevitability. The evidence I had gathered, the reconstructed documents, the keylogger data, the trademark registration, and the testimony of Agent Reyes formed a case so airtight that the Whitmore's own attorneys advised them to plead. Within 4 months, Kelsey and Travis pleaded guilty to 1 count each of wire fraud and 1 count of criminal trademark infringement. They were sentenced to 6 years in federal prison, with an additional 3 years of supervised release. The house, the Mercedes, the bank accounts, the franchise assets, everything was seized and liquidated. The restaurant group that had purchased the brand filed a civil suit for fraud in the inducement and was awarded restitution from the forfeited assets. But here is where Grammy's brilliance paid out in full. Because Kelsey and Travis had used my federally registered trademark without authorization, I was entitled to statutory damages for every infringing sale they had ever made. The court awarded me $360,000 in disgorged profits, plus a perpetual royalty of 12 cents on every product sold under any variant of the Graham's Golden Crust name, until the trademark naturally expires in 2030. And since I still own the trademark, no one can use it without my express permission, which means I receive a royalty check every quarter from the court-appointed receiver, who manages the residual franchise operations, a check that will arrive like clockwork until I'm 90 years old. I took the first installment of that money and did exactly what Grammy would have wanted. I bought a 1995 Grumman step van, a retired bakery delivery truck with a squeaky sliding door, and a hood the color of faded denim. I spent 6 weeks retrofitting it with a 3-compartment sink, a commercial convection oven, and a refrigerated prep counter salvaged from a defunct pizza joint. I painted the exterior deep blue with gold lettering, and on both sides I had a sign painter hand-letter the name of my new operation, Unkept Promise Pies. The pies themselves are made from Grammy's true recipe, the one I'd been using all along but never fully disclosed, the one with the secret in the crust. A single tablespoon of apple cider vinegar that retards gluten development, makes the dough flaky and foolproof, and gives each bite a tender collapse that store-bought pastry never achieves. No one ever knew the vinegar was there because you can't taste it, you only taste the butter and the fruit, but it's the reason her crust was legendary. I park that truck every morning at 6 o'clock in the same gravel lot off I-81 where Kelsey's first gleaming food trailer once sat, and I sell out by noon. Truckers pull over when they see the blue van, guys who remember me from the depot, guys who knew Leo, guys who ask about the truck's name. I tell them the truth. A pie is a promise baked into a crust, and I keep my promises. Every receipt that prints from my point-of-sale system includes, at the very bottom in small type, the federal court docket number of my daughter's conviction, just 4 numbers and the letters CR, a tiny permanent reminder that some promises have teeth that bite back years later. I don't do it to be vindictive. I do it because transparency is a form of justice, and because every time someone orders a slice of blackberry cobbler pie, they are looking at a receipt that says, "This recipe was not a gift. It was a trust, and trusts have guardians." Grammy always said that dough like trust needs cold hands and a warm heart. My daughter had neither, but I never needed her to. I just needed to remember that I'd spent a lifetime fixing things that were broken: solenoid valves, lock tumblers, shredded financial statements, and yes, eventually a generational betrayal. Some things you can't fix, so you do the next best thing. You make sure the gears of the world grind in the right direction, even if it takes a federal indictment and a pie truck to do it. Have you ever discovered a dark secret about someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? Tell me in the comments below. If you think I did the right thing, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories where the quiet ones finish last only because we're measuring twice and baking from scratch. This is Lorna, signing off.